Hey, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast. This is Casey McLean. I'm back. This is maybe the first time I've been on Twitter in a little while because, or whatever, X, because I recorded, I know I recorded the last one live. By the way, fun episode last Thursday on the YouTube channel with Dan Viens, who is from the Seahawks Forever podcast. I'm just making sure real quick that my audio is correct. Great episode with Dan Viens. Love Dan Viens. The Seahawks Forever podcast is, he's doing like 5 episodes a week right now, and I'm watching basically all of them. He just put out a great episode doing his predictive mock draft, which the distinction he makes there is that it is not a mock draft, not a mock draft of what he thinks the Seahawks should do, but what what not should do, but what he thinks they will do, which is probably slightly different. We're going to do a 7-round mock draft simulation today, but I want to talk first because I've had like a cool couple weeks of comedy that has led me to, and we'll get this back to sports pretty quickly because I got to open for Whitney Cummings. That was pretty awesome. I'm going down to, I got to go to Helium, Portland to open for my buddy Gabe Rutledge, who's like crushing, by the way, having a huge career surge. And that was awesome. I love seeing that. Great comedy club. And I will be there again this weekend opening for Ronan Hirschberg. But last night I got to do this really cool thing. I ran tech for the 420 Adam Ray, Sean Kemp, and Gary Payton show at Tacoma Comedy Club. If you were there, by the way, you heard my name said multiple times because there were some technological difficulties that we fought through. But I will say, I feel the need to defend myself. We made some improvisations at the last minute to make that show work. So pretty cool to watch Adam Ray talk to Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, and hopefully I suspect there's nothing crazy that I think they'll edit out. I did one time record a live podcast for John Ryan, and I can't remember the name of his co-host, but he had a podcast that was like on Seahawks.com, and I recorded, I think it might have been 2 episodes of it there, live in front of a live audience, and I sat through like, I think my buddy Andrew Rivers did 10 minutes of stand-up at the top or something like that, so it ends up being like 80-minute episodes, so like 160 minutes of podcasting. And when I left, I was like, I don't know how they're going to scrape together a 45-minute podcast out of that, because that is like, none of that shit is going to fly on Seahawks.com. And not only did that episode not come out, but I think that was, they never did an episode after that. And I suspect that was the reason why. I mean, it was just too wild. And back then, these brands it wasn't like Wendy's trying to take down Katy Perry. These brands weren't doing that stuff. The Seahawks weren't going to stand behind some, drunk punter that was being hilarious, by the way, being incredibly funny at a comedy club. So if you were at the comedy club last night, you heard Adam Ray shit on me a couple times, which was a great way to improvise through some problems that were occurring. And by the way, if you were at that John Ryan podcast, let me know, because I'm curious what that was like from an audience member's perspective. It's always, I wanted to go to this show, but it was on Easter, and I was at my in-laws, and my wife is just always very protective of family holidays, because realistically, we showed up at my in-laws at like noon, and I left at 4:30. 4.5 hours is a long time to be at somebody's house. I left at 4:30 to go be at the club at 5:30. Anyways, I'm not sure where that... I will certainly talk about that and maybe even show some clips from that podcast whenever it comes out, wherever it comes out. I think it's probably on Adam Ray's podcast about last night, but it might be a standalone video. He's also doing these like Dr. Phil specials that are crazy, doing huge numbers, so check that out. Adam Ray is living the comedy dream for a Seattle sports fan. He is interviewing Seattle athletes. He had Cal Raleigh on his podcast a couple months ago, and he's going to games and throwing out first pitches, and it's awesome. It's great to see because he's doing exactly what I would hope I would want to do if I had the success he had and the notoriety to get these teams to want me to come and do events and stuff like that. So, and by the way, he's the real deal on like sports fandom. Every now and then you see these guys. I remember a couple years ago, like the Chiefs got good, and then like the fat dude from Modern Family is suddenly the biggest Chiefs fan in the world. By the way, he probably was. I'm telling you, Adam Ray is one of us. Adam Ray is like a hardcore Seattle sports fan. A person who's, he's not listening to this podcast. He's not one of us, but he's like really knows his shit. So, anyway, but it's very cool. We will take a look at that when the time comes. I wanted to talk about the Mariners' success. The Mariners got to 3-7, and the Doomsday fan base came out. Everybody was, it was Chicken Little left and right. The sky was falling. And I'll tell you, like, I'm not an optimistic Mariners fan. I'm not some diehard optimist. I'm pretty skeptical and cynical about the Mariners. But you can't get me in the first 20 games of the season. You can't get me in the first month of the season. That's, I guess, a rule I've set for myself inadvertently. But, like, you're not going to get me to freak out in the first couple weeks of the season. Ever. 3-7, 7-3. My blood pressure does not change. And since then they've gone on a 9-3 run. They're 2 games over 500. And a lot of stuff is clicking, especially like the offense looks a lot better. The strikeout rates are more sustainable or at least could yield more sustained success. Cal Raleigh's knocking the shit out of the ball. Dylan Moore is the team's best hitter right now, which is not necessarily something we predicted. Randy Arozarena has been good at the plate, and the Mariners have done everything they've had to do to weather the storm of losing Victor Robles and losing Ryan Bliss. Although I will say, I think that the Robles weathering is going to be a lot harder than the Bliss weathering. And the reason I say that is the Mariners actually have, obviously they have Dylan Moore who can play second base, and they've had a little bit of they have options to replace Ryan Bliss. I don't know that they have another, unless you are going to use Luke Raley every day. They don't have great options to replace Victor Robles. And I'm not saying that's a bad option, by the way. I think that's a better option. The original note I had written down to talk about with the Mariners, and I'm gonna temper it a little bit because of what happened this weekend. The original note was this team needs to figure out how to get Rowdy Tellez. Well, not even figure out. They need to figure out how to get Randy Arozarena into the DH spot. This team has a DH on the roster. His name is Randy Arozarena, a guy who last year when they traded for him, I said that he was not as bad of a defender as I thought his reputation suggested, and I think his defense has gotten statistically significantly worse since then. He's a bad outfielder and a very good hitter, and maybe he's the kind of guy that would struggle to hit well if he's a DH. We'll find that out. That dude should not be in the field, and Rowdy Tellez, I'm going to say it, even though he came out of this weekend with 3 more home runs, even though he hit a walk-off grand slam, Rowdy Tellez, and as much as I like him, and he also looks like a Latino version of my friend Josh Firestein, he just doesn't belong on this roster. There's not a fit. He's not a great defensive first baseman. He's not a great hitting first baseman. I would love to see the Mariners acquire someone who's a more legitimate first base candidate. I also want to figure out, they got to figure out what's going on with Jorge Polanco. Is he going to be able to play the field? Is he not going to be able to play the field? That's not a great, he's hit well this year, which has certainly helped, but he's not a great long-term option at DH. If Jorge Polanco is your DH, we are in Jose Vidro territory of DHs. That dude, they got to figure out how to get him, if that means a DL stint or an IL stint, whatever we call it now, so that he can get healthy enough to play the field. If that means, by the way, that he takes some of those reps at second base, which I'm not against, but I feel like there's going to be a bunch of people reminding everybody that they signed him to fill the third base spot. I don't know if he's a third baseman. The guy needs to be in the field because he's not a good enough hitter to be a DH. and I was ready to send Rowdy Tellez off the cliff. Walk the plank in the maritime in the maritime team. Walk the plank, Rowdy Tellez, but he hit 3 home runs over the weekend. Is he going to be any good after that? I don't know. I don't think anything points to him turning into a legit contributor at DH, a better than average DH. You got to be happy with the fact that Ben Williamson is hitting it all is exciting. Like that's. Do they not? Does Fangraphs? Oh, they do have him updated. I'm looking at the Fangraphs website right now. Yeah, he hit a home run. He hit his first career home run, but he's playing like a quality defensive third base. If he can be anything of a hitter at all, I think that's promising, and allows you just anything to allow Dylan Moore to bounce around. And that's actually the thing I really want to talk about, because I spent all of the last 2 years talking about the park, how the park is affecting pitching and hitting. And then Mike Petriello writes a really good article about it. And it's kind of become the topic that, everyone's on board with it. Everyone is aware of it at this point. I think the ballpark is what makes the pitching staff dominant and the offense suppressed at home. The fact that it took years of these two things occurring, the Mariners being able to turn, mid-level pitching into guys putting up ace stats, and while simultaneously turning productive hitters into journeymen, is the fact that those two things, nobody ever made the connection in a like mainstream media or on the team, apparently. That was always frustrating to me, but now we're there. Everyone's aware of that. The pitching staff is good, but it's not historically great. The offense is actually is a lot better this year, but is also not historically great. This is a team that's pretty average on both sides of the ball. And so anything to give them an edge, because they don't have a ton of depth. They don't have a ton of organizational depth. And Dylan Moore is one of these pieces that the fact that he can move around and play a bunch of different positions, the Mariners might be able to squeeze an extra couple drops of value. And if they're going to make the playoffs this year, which, by the way, I think they're at 68% playoff odds on Fangraphs, but if they're going to make the playoffs this year, they're still going to need to squeeze every drop. Dylan Moore is absolutely mashing right now. He's got a .316 batting average, .371 on base, .596 slugging. That will not be sustained, but good for a 187 WRC plus. His batting average on balls in play, by the way, .342, which is high, but that's not like crazy out of the realm of possibility for. It's certainly not his. I don't know what his career batting average on balls in play is. But that's like the first place you go to look for a guy who's just having batted ball luck that's going to fall apart. No, career .278 batting average on balls in play. Maybe I take it back. Maybe he will. Maybe that will just mean a slide down to a .240 batting average. If he can maintain anything close to the same power, that's still a very valuable hitter, though. My question is, when do you start talking about extension for Dylan Moore? Because Dylan Moore is 32 years old. By the way, Dylan Moore has been good he's been so 2019 he comes up at 26 years old. I have a great comp for this, by the way, so be prepared for that. 2019, Dylan Moore comes up, 26 years old, puts up 0.9 wins above replacement in 113 games, 88 WRC plus, positive defensive value. Next year, 2020, obviously it's the COVID shortened season, 140 WRC plus, 1.3 wins above replacement. Great for that season. Then 2021 has a little bit of a drop-off, 74 WRC plus, still 1.1 wins above replacement. A lot of that value coming from his defense. Since then, his defense, and a lot of it is just him shifting around positions, I suspect. But he's had his defense has kind of dropped off in its actual run value, but he's playing a bunch of different positions, so it's a little bit harder to actually quantify his value. But what I'll say is 127 WRC plus, 107 WRC plus, 105 WRC plus, 187 as of now. This is not a fluke anymore. Dylan Moore is a better than average major league hitter, especially because he hits lefties particularly well, but he is a better than average major league hitter that can play a whole bunch of positions. That guy has value on any roster in all of baseball. And this is also, by the way, his like raw numbers, his like straight up counting numbers, not park adjusted, any of that stuff. That's going to look worse on the free agent market. So my hypothesis is, because of this, because Dylan Moore has no prospect pedigree, because he's 32 years old and he's going to be a free agent and it's going into his age 33 season, I don't think the market for Dylan Moore is going to be huge. I don't think he's going to be pulling, what was the dude, Willie Adames, who got like a $25 million a year deal. I don't think that's what Dylan Moore is going to get. In fact, I don't even think he's going to get what Gleyber Torres got, and I think he's a better player than Gleyber Torres. He's a couple years older, but I think he's a better player than Gleyber Torres. The guy that I think the perfect comp, who I actually think is a worse player by far, but who's let's I'm gonna pull him up right now. I just want to comp these two guys for you. I'm like gonna say the name out loud on accident. So this guy, career batting average 280, 328, 413. That's his career triple slash line for a 99 WRC plus. WRC plus, of course, is park adjusted. Dylan Moore, 211, 318, 392. The one guy that I'm talking about, coming off of his age 33 season. Coming off his age 32 season, is that right? Sorry. This is coming off of his age 34 season. So he was a couple years older when he signed this contract. Signed a 1-year, $8 million deal with the Philadelphia Phillies. His name is Whit Merrifield. Once like a pretty respected prospect. I'm actually surprised to find out that he came up at age 27. I thought that he was had a little more prospect pedigree than that. Came up with the Royals, but had like a prospect pedigree, which Dylan Moore does not, which is going to hurt him, even though there's no, I don't think there's a good reason for that. 1 year, $8 million. So if you set the $8 million annual average as like the baseline, that's where we're going to start him. Should he get more or less than that? Well, if you give him a multi-year deal, you maybe get an annual average discount potentially. The Mariners they were pretty aggressive with Victor Robles. They signed him to a deal that I was not thrilled with the idea of signing Victor Robles to an extension. Partially not because I dislike Victor Robles, but because I thought it would encourage the Mariners to just go cheap on their outfield, which, by the way, they kind of did. It's worked out kind of well for them at this point, but it's not. There's no version of that. There's no version of them going cheap that could have convinced me that that was a bad deal. He signed such a team-friendly contract. Like, yes, you absolutely have to sign Victor Robles to that deal. If you can get something similar out of Dylan Moore, if you could sign Dylan Moore, please comment on this. If you're watching this far, please comment. 2 years, $15 million today. So the it's $7.5 million annual average, whatever you want to bounce the salary up and down. 2 years, $15 million signed today for Dylan Moore. Means you're paying him as like less than a 1 win above replacement player. Guy that hits lefties, that plays all over the diamond, that's hitting the shit out of the ball right now. Going into his age 33 season. Do you do that deal? Do you do that deal right now? Because I think I do. Anyway. I also, by the way, in the off season, I was willing to entertain the idea of signing starting pitching that a lot of people were not. And I had Blake Snell. I always get Blake Snell and Ian Snell mixed up in my mind. Blake Snell is the right guy. Yeah. Blake Snell signs with the Dodgers. This guy's like made it very obvious that he wanted to play for the Mariners, and the Mariners like, well, we're all full. Basically, they're like, we're all full up at starting pitching, and you can't move on from Luis Castillo without him signing off on his no trade clause. But I mean, Snell has been successful in other places. The Mariners pitching staff, they're pretty average when they get outside of T-Mobile Park. I think Blake Snell would be the best pitcher on this roster. And it's not that these guys are bad. It's not that Logan Gilbert is bad or George Kirby is bad. It's that their starting five are all very good pitchers. But I don't know that there's a guy that if you put him in a neutral offensive environment that is an ace on a staff. And anyway, I don't love the idea of them spending a whole bunch of money on the pitching staff and not on the offense, because guys that are here are going to put up numbers in a suppressed environment. I want them to spend the money on the offense. So anyways, let's move on to this because I got to get out of here. By the way, I went downstairs a little bit ago. I was like prepping for this, and I may or may not have fallen asleep on the couch with my dog. So if I'm a little out of sorts, it's just the typical reason. Father of two, tired 100% of the time. I don't know what draft content's going to look, by the way. I want to do one more episode of this podcast this week, but realistically, I got a lot of stuff that I got to get done before I start my weekend with Ron on in Portland. So I'd like to do one more draft related episode. We will see, but I wanted to make sure we got this one in today because, and here it is. Today we're going to use the Pro Football Network. They've started to rebrand as the Pro Football and Sports Network. It's still profootballnetwork.com, but they have a decent, mock draft simulator that's free. We're going to leave it at normal speed and pick our Seahawks. I'm not going to do any trades, even though obviously the Seahawks are going to make some trades. The aforementioned Dan Viens did a couple great episodes of Seahawks Forever talking about potential trades that the Seahawks might make, and you can go check those out. Teams moving up to if Shedeur Sanders falls that far, if teams are looking to trade up for Jackson Dart. So here we go. By the way, shout out to my buddy Bob Springer and his wife Nikki, who I saw last night. Yeah. He's a frequent listener of this podcast. That's the reason I'm shouting him out. So yeah, this is a scenario, by the way, on this draft where the Seahawks, Shedeur Sanders falls to the Seahawks. I don't think there's any chance the Seahawks are going to take him, but the computer here offers, should we do this? Should we just make this deal? Because this is probably somewhat realistic. Pick 18 for pick number 34. Pick 18 and pick 172 for pick 34 and a 2016 first round pick. I'm gonna take this deal, but I'm gonna explain why. Because the Giants next year, there's a decent chance they're not very good again. Even if they get Shedeur Sanders, the combination of Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and Tommy DeVito and Shedeur Sanders, I don't know if any of these guys are gonna make this team better than a 500 team. And if they're not better than a 500 team, and the draft class is significantly better next year, that pick is worth a lot more. And if the Seahawks are looking for a quarterback next year, now they have 2 first-round picks next year to maybe leverage to trade up to acquire an Arch Manning type if he's interested in coming here, or the kid Drew Aller, or whoever the top quarterbacks end up being next year. Or they just have the ability to acquire a bunch more talent. My suspicion is whoever the Seahawks would draft here is somewhat likely to be still available at 34, depending on what your opinion is of so Matthew Golden is probably not going to be there. I know that there was some local conversation. I've been because I don't want my children to listen to horrible swearing comedy podcasts, but listen to a lot of local sports radio, and I know that the Brock and Salk show, they desperately don't want the Seahawks to draft a wide receiver first overall or with their first pick. I don't understand the mental block of you give up DK Metcalf and then they go, well, you just draft a guy and now a couple of years from now he's going to want an extension. He's going to hold out. Yeah, that's how football works. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's the hazard of drafting good receivers. They're going to want to get paid. And that's the reality. Matthew Golden's interesting to me. I'm not committed to the Seahawks taking a receiver in the first round, but I'm not just immediately against it. I think Matthew Golden is an interesting pick there and not a guy that's an actual slot. People will think he's a slot because of his size, not a guy that's an actual slot, guy that can play outside. Jihad Campbell, were it not for his surgery, I'd be like, pick him right there. Guy that I think has potential as I'm like kind of trying to filter through my own biases. I think a guy that might be a pretty quality edge rusher and can be versatile in this scheme. Anyways, so we're gonna accept this trade. Move down to the 34th pick. The Giants take Shedeur at 18. They try to get ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers in that case, who seem to be where Shedeur is headed at this point. And so this is interesting because I'm not gonna accept any more trades in this draft. So, the Browns let the draft fall to them, and Jalen Milroe goes 33rd overall before Jackson Dart, which I don't think. I mean, this second tier of quarterbacks has started to really clump up. If depending on what you think about Shedeur, the difference between like the draft stock of Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart seems to be shrinking every single day. At a time, it seemed obvious that Jackson Dart would be a first rounder. I don't know if that's true anymore. At a time, it seemed obvious that Shedeur Sanders would be a first rounder. I don't think that's true anymore. And at a time, it seemed like Jalen Milroe was going to be like a third or fourth rounder. And now he's invited to the draft because the NFL has intel that suggests he's going to be drafted in the first round. So Jihad Campbell falls to the Seahawks here. I mean, I think if this is the legit what legit happens, and Jihad Campbell and Kenneth Grant are both there, that's going to be a tough choice. I like Kenneth Grant. I think Jihad Campbell's probably gone by now, but he has been injured. I just think Kenneth Grant is the more unique talent there. Not that he's better than Jihad Campbell, but that he's. I just think that he's. By the way, we gave up 172, right? So that brings the total draft picks down to, I think, like, what is it, 9 picks? Yeah, no more. We're not taking any more trades. Jackson Dart falls to 50 in this draft, and that's another question, by the way, because I'm going to probably try to take Quinn Ewers at some point in this draft. He's my guy. He's like the guy that nobody likes that I've never stopped liking. He PFF. Pro Football Focus just did a 7-round mock draft. He went 244 in that mock draft. He's a guy that I'm like, I have a history. I've talked a lot about how I thought Kirk Cousins was going to be good when he got drafted, and he was good. That would be me filtering my success stories and not telling you the failures. I thought Curtis Painter, who got drafted he played for Purdue and got drafted by the Colts. I was like, this dude is... I believe Purdue was running a pro-style offense at the time, but I thought Curtis Painter was going to be the guy. I think he got drafted in like the 4th or 5th round. Jevon Sneed was an Ole Miss quarterback that was like, I talked to Dan Viens about it last week, but it was in the discussion for number 1 overall in the preseason of the year of his draft and goes undrafted. I like both these guys a lot. In both cases, I wanted the Seahawks to draft them as like organizational depth, especially with Sneed as it went like round after round and he wasn't there, but how late into this draft does Jackson Dart have to fall before you like draft a guy in a spot that's kind of early? Do you know what I mean? Because the first 4, maybe 5 rounds of the NFL draft, typically, these are guys that you expect to make your roster. And round 6 and 7, a lot of times, this is where you expect to find guys that are going to have playing time on their rookie contract. And then round 6 and 7, these are going to be a lot of, you take a big swing on a guy, special teams guy, practice squad guy, maybe guys that are going to compete for spots, but you don't want to run the risk of not getting them in undrafted free agency. How far does Jackson Dart have to fall? I would suspect he's not going to get drafted by the Broncos here. If he goes to 52, do you want Jackson Dart? I'm not going to take him. But I'm curious what you think. How far would Jackson Dart have to fall for you to be happy with the Seahawks taking him? Also, by the way, Drew Lock, $1 million in guaranteed money. You can get out of that deal very easily without a ton of damage. So I'm going to take Tate Ratledge here. I think it makes sense. I like Ariante Ursary more because I think he's got the versatility to be a tackle. In fact, if I'm taking Tate Ratledge. I don't have a good reason. I'm taking Tate Ratledge, and I don't have a good reason. Femi Oladejo is appealing there. We already got, so Alfred Collins is still available. Probably would not be available at the Seahawks' next pick. A little bit of a reach here, probably. I like him, but do you come away here with a corner is the question. Dorian Strong's interesting. How high did... Oh, Darian Porter. God damn it. Darian Porter's probably who I should have taken because there were two offensive line options. Anyways, he goes to the Broncos, which is that's a bad beat, as they would say in poker. I don't love Trey Amos, but I do kind of think, well, we're going Femi Oladejo. We'll figure it out. Jaden Higgins was a possibility. 2 picks. No. Do we give up 82? No, we didn't give up 82. I was looking at the top right. So hopefully, Jaden Higgins goes. Hopefully there is a suitable receiver available at this next spot. I'm not a big Jack Besh guy, but he's interesting. I just don't find him very exciting, which might be me. That's a bias that I have for sure. I am biased towards upside over floor always. And that's all rounds of the draft for me. I think NFL teams are a little more cautious in the earlier rounds and take bigger swings later, and I want big swings. Never stop swinging hard. If I'm an NFL personnel guy, I say that as someone who's not an NFL personnel guy, and I might be a real coward if it was my job. If my job depended on making successful selections. I think if Tyler Shuck is here at 81 or at 82, I think the Seahawks are really thinking about Tyler Shuck again, even with Drew Lock on the roster. Jackson Dart is still there too. I'm not going to take a quarterback this early, but it's getting crazy, folks. I guess we'll go Jared Wilson. I'm not convinced that do I want that? Yeah, we'll go Jared Wilson. 2 interior offensive linemen in the first 4 picks, but then you're done. I mean, that's the end. Oh, Jackson Dart goes to the Steelers at 83. That would be a tremendous pick by the Steelers there. There's a bunch of teams that I don't think would actually pass on him that many times, but here we are. Dorian Strong is going to be that corner. He's probably the last. I like Demetrius Knight quite a bit too, and there's a big gap to 137 before the Seahawks pick again, and so you kind of want to make sure you max this pick out because the talent level I think is going to drop off quite a bit between these picks. But yeah, I think you got to take Dorian Strong. So now Kenneth Grant. I like Kenneth Grant, but I think that probably this draft, you might be happier if you had taken Jihad Campbell at this point. Because Demetrius Knight just went off, right? And he would have been exciting to pick in the 3rd round also. I don't think that my sweet Quinn Ewers is going to be off the board when we pick again. Yeah, go Quinn Ewers is 132 on their big board. We'll see. So this is the spot. I mean, round 4, I'm totally fine with the Seahawks. End of round 4 especially, totally fine with the Seahawks taking... Well, Quinn Ewers goes. Where did Quinn Ewers go? 130 to the Detroit Lions. So now I think you're in my opinion is the next tier of quarterback. They have these guys ranked a lot more closely than I think they really are. To me, Dylan Gabriel is like undraftable. The only team that makes sense for Dylan Gabriel to me, because he's such a similar skill set and is left-handed, which I think is worth considering, is Miami. And I think they're the one team that's going to have special interest in him, and maybe they take him in the 6th or 7th round. Other than that, I think he's undraftable. So yeah, now we're gonna wait. Now we're not touching quarterback for a long time. Danny Stutzman probably is the guy here. I think what I'm going to do for the next one, I'm gonna borrow an idea from the many times now mentioned Dan Viens and use some kind of big boards to make a mock draft of what I think the Seahawks will actually do. But because these always leave you a little unsatisfied. If Elijah Roberts falls here, I'm gonna have a hard time passing up on him. He's a guy that's like listed as an edge by some people, as a defensive tackle by some people. He's got the size to be either. And come on, Elijah Roberts, just make it one more. There we go. I was just watching him slowly climb up the best available players board because players ahead of him kept getting drafted. Let's make sure I'm not missing someone that I really love. And we've taken an edge. We've taken Kenneth Grant, the nose tackle. He's a nose tackle, though, not like a 3-4 defensive end, traditional defensive tackle, just like a legit nose tackle who has some ability to play on 2nd and 3rd down. Also, I don't think I can talk myself out of it, though. Elijah Roberts. Let's see. We can read the. Let me pause it so we can read the. I'm curious what their scouting report. This is another thing too, by the way. The PFF simulator, I pay for Pro Football Focus, so I can do it as many times as I want in a day. They have pretty good scouting reports on a lot of draft prospects. Not all of them, but on a lot of them. Pro Football Network is free and has also very good scouting reports. This is I think the 6'3", 285, but I think if you could just search for high motor, that's like a good. I bet there's a strong correlation of guys that have been described as having a high motor in the Seahawks drafting them. That might be an interesting data project that nobody will ever. I'm certainly not going to undertake, but that would be interesting to me to read is the correlation of specific scouting terms and what teams draft them. Jabbar Muhammad went 199 here, which when we've been doing the PFF ones, he falls to, he's like going to go undrafted on that one. And I think 199 is closer. I'm a Jabbar Muhammad guy. Partially because he's been an author of really amazing moments and then also a bunch of consternation about him moving on to Oregon. Okay. So I actually like another thing about I might be becoming a Pro Football Network, Pro Football and Sports Network. That's not quite roll off the tongue the same. The fact that they list the Seahawks needs as offensive guard, offensive tackle, as opposed to offensive guard, center, to me is more accurate because I don't think the Seahawks they need an interior offensive lineman, and they probably need two guys that can play guard, and one of those guys you'd like to be able to play tackle. And I think they're going to figure out center with the guys that are on the roster, or the guy that they drafted to guard maybe can also play center. But so have we filled all these spots that they have as needs? No receiver. Haven't taken a receiver yet. I don't think I'm going to be excited about a receiver at any point. I wanted to take one earlier and did not accomplish it. Wilson and Ratledge, to me, that's as many offensive linemen as I think you can realistically take in this draft without having to cut someone who's probably not going to make it through waivers. Because could start looking at quarterback here. I like Curtis Rourke, Indiana quarterback, Canadian even. I do like him. I like him enough to draft him here. Just want to make sure I'm not leaving somebody else out. Donovan Edwards, by the way, we talked about it on the Dan Vien's episode. His testing was great. I'm in agreement with Dan that I'm confused at what has like killed his stock. I think they're going to have in this, I think there will be a chance at him at 234, so I'm going to take Rourke. But I think in real life I would be surprised if he lasted till this far into the 7th round or the 7th round period. There he is. We'll take Donovan Edwards last. Since I don't get the Memorial Jabbar Muhammad pick to close it out, Donovan Edwards is probably the guy. So let's take a look at that draft class. That'll finish up. But if this is the case, and I typically don't like to do trades in these because the Seahawks are probably going to make a bunch of trades, but I don't know what they're going to be. Kenneth Grant, I'm happy with. Tate Ratledge at 50, I'm fine with. Femi Oladejo, maybe it was a little bit of a reach. I don't know. Jared Wilson at 82, happy with. I've seen him mocked the Seahawks in the 2nd round. Dorian Strong, I'm not thrilled about. I would have liked to get Darian Porter. I would have liked to get Ravel. Danny Stutzman, similar. I'd have rather had Demetrius Knight, but he doesn't fall to where I wanted to take him. I like Elijah Roberts. Curtis Rourke is fine. Donovan Edwards is fine, but the big win out of this draft, potentially, this one that I made that you may think is a huge pile of shit, is getting that 2026 first-round pick. That's a pretty big win. That's a pick that's probably worth, if the Seahawks were considering Kenneth Grant at 18, that's a pretty big win to get a first-round pick and get the guy that you want. So, all right, that's I think that's going to be the end of the episode, which is a short one, but I'm tired. I've been very busy. I don't want to drag it out just for the sake of it. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you, I think, later in the week. Oh, wait, we got to set this. Here we go. Let's end this stream.